It begins with a silence, one that stretches across decades, buried under sand, sealed behind steel doors, and protected by the invisible armor of national security. In that silence lies a story that officials have spent entire careers trying to contain, a record of decisions and operations that shaped a nation built in turmoil and preserved through secrecy. Every country keeps classified archives, but few have cultivated their hidden history as carefully or as anxiously as Israel. For generations, historians, journalists, and even former intelligence officers have spoken in hushed tones about the documents stored within the labyrinth of secure basements beneath Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and the scattered military compounds whose exact coordinates rarely appear on maps. These files, they say, contain the truths that were too dangerous to acknowledge, too explosive to release, and too transformative to allow into the open. They describe wars that were not fully explained, alliances that were never admitted, and events that reshaped the Middle East long before most of the world even knew they were happening. The story of Israel's secret archives is not one of conspiracy. It is one of history, messy, complicated, and often tragic. It is a story of a young state struggling to survive in a hostile environment, making decisions that would ripple far beyond the borders of the region. But it is also the story of what happens when national survival becomes inseparable from secrecy, when governments choose silence over transparency, and when crucial questions about war, displacement, and political power are answered not with public debate but with confidentiality stamps in locked rooms. Over the years, fragments of these sealed records have leaked into the public domain, each revelation igniting global debate and fueling demands for accountability. Many of the files remain sealed, sitting in the darkness where they have rested for half a century or more. Yet the pieces that have emerged tell us enough to understand why full disclosure has never been allowed, and why even now, the struggle over these documents remains one of the most important battles in Middle Eastern historical memory. To understand the significance of these secret archives, one must return to the late 1940s, when the newly declared State of Israel faced existential threats from all sides. As war erupted between Jewish and Arab forces in Mandatory Palestine, a mass displacement unfolded. 750,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes in what they remember as the Nakba, or catastrophe. For decades, Israel's official narrative maintained that most Palestinians had left voluntarily or at the urging of Arab leaders. But historians like Benny Morris, working with partially declassified files from the Israel Defense Forces (IDF) archive, uncovered internal military reports, operational orders, and commander accounts that contradicted this claim. These documents revealed that Israeli forces carried out deliberate expulsions in certain areas and destroyed hundreds of villages to prevent return. The archives also unveiled secret cabinet discussions from the early 1950s, showing leaders debating how to ensure that the refugee population never re-entered the new state's borders. The release of these records in the 1980s and 1990s, known as the New Historians Wave, was not accidental. It happened because Israel had a 30-year declassification policy, and some of the original military files related to the 1948 war reached their expiration date. But as more sensitive material began to surface, material related to specific expulsions, intelligence operations, and government decisions, the state abruptly tightened its archiving laws. Documents that had been accessible for years began disappearing from public shelves as officials reclassified them. Entire collections were sealed indefinitely under the justification of national security. This act of secrecy became its own historical event, proof that the narrative concealed within the archives held power even generations later. Another set of documents hidden deep within the classified vaults concerns Israel's nuclear program, a topic long shrouded in intentional ambiguity. Since the 1960s, Israel has never officially confirmed nor denied possessing nuclear weapons, maintaining a policy known as amimut, or opacity. The origins of this secrecy lie in agreements between Israel and France in the mid-1950s, when the two nations collaborated on the construction of the Dimona nuclear facility in the Negev Desert. France provided the technology, engineering expertise, and initial materials. Israel provided strategic partnership during the Suez Crisis and shared intelligence valued by European powers. The Israeli cabinet minutes, internal communications, and security directives from that period remain among the most tightly guarded files in the nation's history. Researchers know that these archives include discussions between David Ben-Gurion and foreign governments, internal debates about whether nuclear capacity would destabilize the region, and the controversial arrangements with the United States that allowed Israel to develop nuclear capability without triggering American sanctions. Some documents reportedly detail covert operations carried out by Mossad to acquire materials and technology abroad, including the disappearance of enriched uranium from a U.S. nuclear facility in the 1960s, the case never fully resolved. Other materials relate to the censorship system that Israel built to enforce silence, including agreements with major newspapers and media outlets. Even today, scholars studying the nuclear files find that most requests are denied on the grounds that disclosure could damage national security, reveal intelligence methods, or threaten Israel's strategic advantage. Hidden within the classified collections is also the untold story of early intelligence operations that helped define Israel's regional role. The Mossad, founded in 1949, quickly became one of the world's most formidable intelligence services. But its history did not begin with cinematic missions to capture Nazi fugitives or rescue endangered Jewish communities abroad. The earliest archives reveal a network of survival-driven espionage efforts, some controversial, some extraordinary. These include the recruitment of local informants in neighboring Arab states, clandestine communication lines with governments facing internal instability, and covert actions designed to influence political outcomes across the Middle East. Many of the files most tightly guarded relate to operations that went beyond traditional intelligence collection. Scholars believe these archives contain details about covert activities in Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, including contact with dissident groups, infiltration of political movements, and early attempts to shape regional power balances. Israel's role in the 1956 Suez Crisis, for instance, involved secret agreements between Israel, Britain, and France, agreements that were kept hidden for years and may contain details about how the three countries plan to reshape Middle Eastern borders and control regional resources. Similarly, files concerning Israel's involvement in Lebanon before and during the 1982 war include material that remains classified due to the political sensitivities surrounding militia relationships and covert support networks. Equally sensitive are the documents related to Palestinian political movements and Israeli strategies for managing or manipulating them. Files from the 1960s and 1970s reportedly include intelligence assessments on the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, secret negotiations carried out behind the scenes long before official peace talks, and covert efforts to divide or weaken emerging political factions. Some journalists have claimed that the archives contain internal debates about the long-term consequences of settlement expansion, including warnings from military and intelligence officials that certain policies would deepen conflict for generations. The secrecy surrounding these records is not simply a matter of national security. It is also a matter of political responsibility, as their release could reshape public understanding of how certain conflicts evolved. There are also human stories sealed within the archives, accounts of individuals whose lives intersected with secret operations or political decisions. Files relating to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza after 1967 contain testimonies from soldiers, police reports, and intelligence assessments that detail early policies for controlling population movement, land use, and political expression. Some materials document covert agreements between Israel and foreign powers regarding the administration of occupied territories. Many rights groups have fought to release these documents, arguing that they contain critical evidence of how modern policies in the region were formed. Israel's government, however, continues to block access, maintaining the disclosure would harm diplomatic relationships or undermine current security operations. One of the most controversial elements of Israel's secret archives involved its early contacts with apartheid South Africa. Though some material has been declassified, many files remain sealed. The existing documents show that Israel and South Africa engaged in military cooperation, arms sales, and nuclear discussions during the 1970s and 1980s. But scholars believe that the undisclosed documents go far deeper, revealing the full extent of the partnership, the motivations behind it, and internal political debates about whether supporting a racially segregated regime was compatible with Israel's moral identity. This issue remains highly sensitive, and access to certain archival materials has been restricted far beyond the typical declassification timeline. Another area of secrecy concerns Israel's involvement in African liberation movements and Cold War politics. Throughout the 20th century, Israel maintained complex, shifting alliances with newly independent African nations. Some secret files reportedly detail covert arms shipments, intelligence sharing arrangements, and intervention strategies that shape political developments across the continent. These activities often intersected with U.S. and Soviet Cold War agendas, making them even more sensitive in the context of international diplomacy. As decades have passed, the secrecy surrounding these archives has increasingly collided with public demands for transparency. Israeli historians, international scholars, human rights organizations, and even former officials have urged the government to release more documents, arguing that historical truth is essential for reconciliation, accountability, and a more honest national memory. But Israel has consistently expanded its secrecy laws, extended classification periods, and removed previously available files from public access. The debate is not merely academic. It is deeply moral. For Palestinians seeking recognition of historical injustices, these archives contain long-buried evidence that could validate their experiences and reshape global understanding of the conflict. For Israelis who believe in national self-reflection and democratic accountability, the files represent an opportunity to confront painful chapters of their country's past. For the broader international community, they offer a rare chance to understand the full scope of geostrategic decisions that shaped the modern Middle East. Yet despite the growing pressure, the sealed doors remain closed. The future of these secret files depends on political will within Israel, among historians, and in the global community that continues to question the unresolved mysteries of the region. Perhaps one day the full truth will surface, revealing not only the darkness of past decisions, but also the humanity of those who documented them. For now, the archives remain hidden, holding stories of war and survival, ambition and fear, strategy and error. They remain sealed because within them lies a version of history that many find too powerful, too disruptive, or too painful to confront. And so the silence continues, waiting for the day when the world is finally allowed to hear what has been locked away for so long.